Now we are going to move forward to the second part, or the second part of the session, where we have amazing young members who are working in the Asia and the Pacific and also across the globe for the climate action and proving themselves. So for this session, we have Mr. Amanullah Porag. He's from Bangladesh. He would be moderating this session. He is the NDC and S working group member of Yango. For the panel talk, we have Ms. Rida Rashid, who is a Yango member from Pakistan, and Ms. Shreya Kesi. She is the contact point NDC, and she's from Nepal. So over to you, Mr. Amanullah Porag.
Hello everyone, am I audible? I hope I'm audible. Thank you, Mr. Taimur Siddiqui, for handing over the floor. Hello everyone, my name is Amanullah Porag. I'm from Bangladesh and I'm working in Yango as a Yango NDCs and ACE working group as a member. And I wholeheartedly welcome you all to our Genesis for Climate Action plenary session. Genesis for Climate Action is a youth-led plenary session that focuses on youth participation in different major areas of Asia and Pacific region to support meaningful youth participation in climate action through policy recommendations. As many of you already know, Asia Pacific region are further marginalized and disproportionately affected by the side effects of climate injustice. But unlike their urban counterparts, we have found little voice. This is due to a variety of factors, including limited resources, which keep them out of key policymaking stages. Our session, the Genesis for Climate Action, will address these issues and topics, ensuring and maximizing the voices of Asia and the Pacific. In our panel discussion today, we have two very wonderful young female speakers. One of them is the amazing Rida Rashid, who's from Pakistan. She is a member of Yango and also the founder of Impact and Climate Nexus Network. We also have with us the amazing Shreya Kesi, who's the contact point for Yango NDC's working group. I'd like to welcome you both. And in the first part of our panel discussion, I'd like to give a brief overview of what Yango is, and I'd like to share a short introduction. So Yango is the official children and youth constituency of UNCCC. Yango was officially formed in 2011, where Yango was recognized as the official constituency by UNFCCC. Our mission is to, Our mission is to raise public awareness, share knowledge, and do capacity building. Also working on collaboration, cooperation, and networking. We also focus very much on policy, lobby, and advocacy, and mainly youth action. And our visions are to ensure climate positive and ensure a society that's climate positive and where everyone lives in harmony with nature and the planet. We also want to ensure and empower the young generation who is driving meaningful and impactful and positive change locally, nationally, and internationally. We want a UN body where youth is sitting at the decision-making tables and youth are taken seriously. With these visions, some of our major works are collaboration, cooperation, and network. As you know, we are a network and we facilitate collaboration and cooperation activities for young people to enhance their network and trigger projects in accordance with our vision. This is done through meetings with parties and other constituencies or briefings with the UNFCCC and further UN entities, and also well-interested NGOs, institutions, networks, movements, and stakeholders. Another major thing Yango does is policy advocacy and lobbying. We advocate for pragmatic, responsible, and ambitious climate just policies. Through our submissions and interventions, among other activities, we facilitate the collective participation of young people in official and formal avenues of policy design. Implementation, monitoring, follow-up, and reviews at all levels, Yango does that too. Furthermore, we support and facilitate children and youth participation and engagement in local, national, and international stages. So that was about Yango. And now I'd like to go to our beautiful guest, Rida Rashid, who has been very active in Yango and doing some meaningful work both in Pakistan and globally. So Rida, I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
Lovely. Sorry, my internet is a bit unstable, so don't mind if I break out sometimes. Mm, 1 second. Yeah. So, Rita, as you've been engaged in Asia and the Pacific regions, and you've been policing the policies and the major issues that has been affecting the young people in Asia and Asia Pacific, right? So I want to know from you that what are the some major climate policy issues that are affecting the youth in Asia and the Pacific region?
First of all, hello and assalamu alaikum to everyone, and good morning from Pakistan. Thank you for having me. I think some of the I could actually take a lot of time talking about policy issues that are in the Asia and Pacific region, but specifically, I think the Asia and Pacific region is it is particularly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. And this region is actually home to many, for example, low-lying coastal areas, which makes it even more vulnerable to the sea level rise, and which actually poses a threat to, for example, the infrastructure, the settlements, and especially the agriculture, because agriculture is main part of the Asian region. And even taking, I like linking everything from my personal experience and taking example of my country, the country that I come from, Pakistan. It has been experiencing climate disasters for longer than it has been alive, actually. And this is story of every, I think, Asian country and from the Pacific region as well, from floods to droughts, wildfires, heat waves, um, which actually have significant consequences for health and education, and basically future livelihoods of population. And because most of the population is younger people, they have wait they have even it even more impacts the younger population, because I was just looking at these stats and the facts. India has the largest portion of the young people in any country across the globe, and similarly goes for China. And even my country, for example, we are 220 million people, and 60% of the population is young people. So climate change is particularly affecting the younger population. And specifically talking about some aspects of it, I think lack of education, these disasters resulting from climate change often lead to school closures, and they disrupt the education. And I saw it in 2010 when my village was flooded, and we basically lost access to educational facilities. And similarly in 2022 recently as well. And so this makes it challenging for the young people to access education and gain the necessary skill set and the knowledge to adapt to the changing climate. And additionally, obviously, uh, the countries in the Asia and Pacific region are not very developed. So the youth and the young people in the rural areas already do not have access to the educational resources, including schools and teachers, which limits their opportunities to learn about climate change and its impacts. So it affects them even more. And then limited employment opportunities, I think, because the young people in Asia and the Pacific region face limited employment opportunities in climate resilient sectors due to lack of investment. And uh, this is something that needs to happen at a very regional level, but I'll talk about it later. And sectors such as renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, and ecosystem management, they have the potential, but there are not enough job opportunities for the young people. And then lastly, I think lack of political representation. And this is actually an issue across the globe, but specifically talking about my region, the Asia and Pacific region, I think despite being the most vulnerable to climate change impacts, the young people in Asia and the Pacific region often lack the political representation and are not. Um, I think I'll join the video later because it's very early in the morning here. Basically, the young people in the Asian Pacific region are not involved in are not given the seat at the decision making tables and do not have the power to influence the policy. And I think one of the factors that affects this as well is that this region, particularly as far as I know, and from my personal experience as well, um, the younger population is not treated well by the governments. And that is what I've experienced throughout the decade-long activism as well. So I think the lack of political representation of young people in policy discussions and decision-making processes is actually crucial for ensuring that their voices are heard and their needs are addressed in climate policy. So I think these are the three main policy factors which lack in the Asia and Pacific region and need to be addressed. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sridhar. Those were some excellent points you raised. And I also completely agree with you. I mean, in our country, the political representation of young people in policies and other decision-making tables is very rare. Our older politicians haven't yet recognized youth as the future yet. So those are some excellent points, and I really thank you for raising those points. Now, we'd like to move to our second speaker, the amazing Shreyadi. Shreyadi has been extremely active in following the GST process. She has also worked with several governments to ensure effective climate policies, and she has been engaged with negotiators and other policy makers to ensure young people's participation in the decision making tables. So Shreyadi, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Thank you. Shreyadi, I want to know from you that how can young people effectively engage in with decision makers and negotiators to ensure that their voices are heard in the policy making process?
Yeah, thank you, Parag, for asking this important question. And I'm very honored to be here and share my working experience. So hi, everyone, once again, namaste. My name is Shreya Kesi and I'm from Nepal. In Nepal, as Rida shared, we have been facing lots of climate change impact, from floods to landslide to unprecedented melting of glaciers, even though we have negligible global carbon emissions. And if we see signs, this is only going to increase as climate change accelerates. So we, the young people, we have to take the leadership and do things that we can do in our capacity, to control this. And coming back to your question, Parag, I think no one can deny that young people are the most powerful, influential, innovative, passionate, and energetic group in the society. And if we see the data, there are around 1.8 billion young people who are aged 10 to 24 years old in the world. And this is expected to reach 2 billion by 2050, representing the largest generation in the history. And this is a massive group of people. This is a massive group of young people who are very passionate, who are very energetic. And I think this is the reason alone that why young people needs to be engaged in the policy-making processes. But beyond this, also, there are several reasons that we deserve to be included in the decision-making processes. Young people are the global shapers and global leaders of the world. And still, if we see that there are very less participation of youth and children, as Rida also mentioned, in the decision-making processes, such as the global UN climate change conferences and so on. And if we see the intergenerational equity is enshrined in the convention of the UNFCCC, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and also Paris Agreement. And if we are to make this principle that is in the document in reality, the first step is to include young people in the decision-making processes. Young people, our present and our future, both is being impacted by climate change, be it in the education system, energy system, food security system. We have firsthand faced the impacts of climate crisis in our life. And we know the importance of taking action. And we also know that the urgency of taking action so that it will not be too late to control the climate action. And this experience, this knowledge fuels our motive to work in climate change. And I think this is power. This power needs to be harnessed by the global policymakers, and also our skills that we have with us should be leveraged in every forms of climate action processes. I think before talking about how young people can engage in the decision-making process, I believe it would be also important to talk about what are the challenges that we face to be engaged in these processes. And few of them are like, I think the first one is that I face a lot and I hear from other young people from other parts of the world is limited access to information. There are lots of things happening on the country and also in the international level about the decision-making processes, about climate change and so on, but we have little access to information about what are the things that is happening. And even if we see and check the government website, there are very little information about those things, and we only see those informations when the consultations is already conducted. So like we have very limited access to informations, and there are also lots of like consultation workshop meetings happening on ground. For example, in the preparation of NDCs, the National Determined Contributions, which is the climate action plan of a country, there were also lots of consultations on NAP, the National Adaptation Plans, but young people have limited access to these platforms and resources. I think this is the first key challenges that we face. And the next one is funding, of course, like there is no dedicated funding for young people to engage in the processes. And because we young people, we are mostly like, we work in grassroots organizations, we work in volunteering basis organizations, it is very hard to access fundings from different big networks because there are specific criteria, specific institutional arrangement that is required. And because we don't have that, we work in our own basis, that is also difficult for us. And the next one is about tokenism, that all of us talks about, like, okay, young people needs to be included in the process. And it is a good thing that young people are now being considered and being included in the process. But the worst thing is we are being tokenized. We are being included just to tick the youth box quota, not just for the values we bring on the table, but just like including youth in the quota for just having a youth face in the report or just in a social media post. I think, and it is sometimes very discouraging for us because we want to engage in the process and we are engaged, but we are engaged in a tokenism way. So this is very frustrating for us. And also there is capacity and knowledge gap. For example, if someone invites young people in the consultation processes, they expect us to be expert and we cannot match the level of knowledge with other people who have been working in climate change since decades, since 2 decades, 3 decades. And like there needs to be an understanding of like there are different unique things that young people brings in the table, and that needs to be acknowledged. And there needs to be enabling structures that allows us to participate in the processes despite these challenges. And despite this, young people, this youth climate movement has come a long way. We have reignited the climate movement with urgency by bringing hope in the process, by pressurizing leaders, by asking transparency, by asking transparency and accountability from the leaders, and also taking the leadership in our own hands by conducting grassroots level campaigns, by awareing young people, by awareing people on the ground who has been facing the real impacts of climate change, but they don't know like what climate change is. So we have taken the leadership on our hand. So realizing this in 2020, what we did in Nepal was we conducted a Youth for NDC campaign, and like I got to attend my first COP, that was COP25 in Madrid, through the Youth and for NDCs scholarship. And when I went there for the first time, I came to know about NDCs and why it is important. So NDCs are the National Determined Contributions, and which is also known as the Climate Action Plan of country. It entails like what a country wants to do to mitigate their emission and what a country is planning to do to adapt to the impacts of climate change. So this is a very important climate policy. So for the first time, I got to know about NDCs in COP25. And when I came back to Nepal and read the first NDC of Nepal, I was surprised that there was no single mention of youth, children and education in the first NDC of Nepal. So in 2020, when Nepal was preparing to submit its second NDC, we had two options. The first one was go and strike and protest that our voices are not being included. The next one was to have a meeting with them and let them know that we are interested to be a part of the process. So like we chose the second option and we met the policymakers in the Climate Change Management Division under the Ministry of Forest and Environment. And what they said was like they don't have time, they don't have capacity, and they don't even have manpower to do separate youth-led consultations and to include our voices in the second NDC of Nepal. So what we did was like throughout 2020, it was the COVID year, so it was very challenging, but still we conducted around 17 different consultations that engaged directly 1,000 young people, not just from the urban areas, but also from the areas which is most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, the most remote areas of Nepal, and not just youth, but also children and teachers, and also different youth-led organizations. So throughout that 1 year consultation, we prepared national young people's priorities to the climate action plan of Nepal, and we submitted that to the government. And after that, now to that response, now Nepal has its second NDC that commits to engage young people in the decision-making processes, that commits to build our capacity, not just engaging young people, but also the vulnerable group, indigenous groups, and also children in this processes. So that is a huge milestone for us. So I think this shows that even if we want to engage in the processes, if we do not go and ask our leaders to be engaged in the processes, then we are not being included. Therefore, the first step is to approach your decision-making decision makers that, okay, we want to be engaged in the processes, and there are things that we can meaningfully contribute in the process. Like, we are not just here to take, but we are here to give as well. So I think this is important. First, to approach the decision-making processes, decision makers. And the next one is because young people are also not homogeneous group. We have different working areas. We come from different areas. We come from different sectors and so on. It's important to collaborate with people who are working in this field so that we can build a strong coalition, so that we will be recognized importantly by the decision makers. Second is that. And next one is, there are lots of, I think there are many advocacy group who is working in specific area of climate change, for example, human rights, education, and so on. So we have to join the forces with them so that we can grow stronger and we can do these things together, because it is very difficult to engage with in the policy making level. And the next one is about COP. For example, COP, the Conference of Parties, is the most important climate conference that happens every year. And in COP, there are most of the climate change policies are prepared and drafted in the COP, and that comes in the national levels, and it is being made in national circumstances. So we also need to have the knowledge of COP, how it works, how we can make a difference, and so on. And the next one is about having a party badge. Even in COP, the global climate negotiations, either we can engage ourselves as an observer, just observing the process, not being included in the decision-making processes, just being engaged in side event and protest and action event. But beyond that, we can also approach our decision makers to give us the party badge, which allows us to access this high level climate policy making processes, so that our voices, our needs, our priorities, our concerns can be spoken by ourselves. Like, our voices should not be spoken by other people who is not youth, but we will be there to speak up for ourselves. So I think that is also really important. But at the end, it is important to acknowledge that it is very hard to engage in the policymaking processes, be it nationally, internationally, because of lots of challenges we have. But it's also important for us to be in the policymaking processes, because if we are not there, if young people are not there, then our a big majority of groups' voice will be excluded from that processes. And young people is necessary, like, because we make sure that no one is left behind. So no matter how difficult it is, we have to engage ourselves in the processes. And if we see that a recent study by UNICEF, it shows that only 42% of these global climate action plans mention youth, while only 20% mention children. So this is like, we have to be here, but we are just here. So like, to bridge this gap in the policy making processes, we young people, we ourselves have to take the leadership and like be engaged in the processes that promotes our engagement in the policy making processes. I think I'll stop here. Thank you, Parag.
Thank you, Deep. That was a very detailed answer, and I'm sure our friends who have joined us would be really helpful. I have another very small question with you, following up with what you have talked about COP. It's true that COP is a bit exclusive for young people, right? But there are other processes that young people can join. For example, there is COI, there is RCOI. So can you please briefly tell us how young people can get involved in processes like this RCOI and COI and other, also as example as LCOI? How can young people engage in those processes, and what opportunities do those processes offer for youth engagement in climate action?
Thank you for asking that question, Parag. So we also gave a brief introduction of Yongo. So Yongo is the official children and youth constituency of the UNFCCC. So we are mandated by the UNFCCC, and we get like access to the informations about lots of other opportunities to engage in these processes. So the first thing that I would suggest to young people who wants to engage in this policy making processes and also be active in this global climate discourse is to be a member of Yongo. And I think Hema has shared the Yongo membership link in the chat also. So that is important. And in Yongo also we have multiple working group. For example, there is a specific working group on education. There is a specific working group on NDCs, on women, gender, energy, and so on, even finance. So there are multiple working groups where you can work according to your interest. So this is also important. And through this working group, what we do is like we provide different submissions to the UNFCCC on how youth engagement can be promoted, how young people can be included in many of the processes that is happening inside the UNFCCC. So every year during there is this big COP, the conference of the parties, where these major decisions are being made. And before COP, Yongo organizes a global conference of youth. And before COE also, like we have like different LCOEs and RCOEs and also VCOEs. The LCOEs is local conference of youth. It is a conference organized in a specific country. And through that conference, what we do is we collect the input of all the young people and like ask them what are their priorities for the upcoming COP and how they want to engage themselves in the processes and so on. So we collect those input in the forms of LCOEs, and we also conduct RCOE, which is called Regional Conference of Youth, which is conducted in a regional basis, and that also consolidated young people's voice from that specific region. And indeed, we are also conducting virtual conference of youth for those young people who are not able to participate in person consultations and workshop. They can also participate in this virtual quiz. We did this mainly in the COVID time. So like through these multiple LCOEs, RCOEs, and VCOEs, we go to this global conference of youth, which is organized in the host country. For example, this year, COP28 is being organized in Dubai. So UAE, so the conference of youth, the 18th conference of youth will also be organized some days before COP in Dubai. So in that, what we do is like, it is the most big annual gathering of young people where we, the first aim of like COE is to prepare young people to participate in COP, because COP can be very chaotic and overwhelming. There are lots of things happening at a time. There is also side event, there is also action events, there are also negotiations happening on and so on. So for a new people who has not attended COP and who's like, if it's their first time attending COP, then it can be very chaotic and overwhelming. So what we do is we prepare young people to participate. How can they make the best out of COP? And also participate in the policymaking processes inside the COP. So first is that we build capacity, skill building, and so on. But the most important thing is through this COE, by like consolidating the input of every conference of youth we have got, we prepare a global youth statement. And that includes the global, like that includes the voice of global children and youth on what do they want from the COP, how do they want to engage, what are the kinds of support that they need, what are the things that they can offer, what are the things that they're already doing, what are the challenges they face. So lots of these things, and that is consolidated in the global youth statement. And we submit this statement to the COP28, to the COP presidency, to the Secretary General of the UNFCCC, and also all the big leaders of different countries. And this also makes the basis of how of the Yongo's engagement in the conference. Like what are the things that we push in different side event that we are attending, also in the negotiations that we are attending. So it is that process. So our like every young people's voice is being fed into the statement, and that statement is being submitted to the global decision makers and also spoken in various ways. So that is how we engage ourselves in the processes. So if young people wants to be a part of it, you can be a part of Yongo, so that you will get access to the information about the things that is happening, not just in internationally, but also in your region. For example, I am from Nepal. I can get access to information of what is happening in Nepal and so on. So these are a couple of things. And Yongo also supports, like being a children and youth constituency, we also support young people to participate in this global processes. The first is before COP, there is also SBs, which is the preparatory session for COP, and it is being organized in June in Bonn, Germany. And in this preparation meeting, it is also called as intersessional meeting. And in this intersessional SBs, what happens is all of the decisions that goes to COP is being drafted in this SBs. So it is also important for us to engage in this intersessional. So before intersessionals and before COP also, we organize a lot of capacity building webinars on different topics on energy, education, and disease, global stocktake process, and so on, and like in which young people can be a part of and like increase their knowledge on how they can be a part of this process. And also what we do is like there are lots of opportunities for young people to participate in COP. Like there are many organizations who are sponsoring, who are funding young people, who are providing technical support for young people to engage in these processes, but they may not have that access to information about this thing. So what Youngo does is like we connect young people with those opportunities. Okay, what are the things that other organizations, other people are giving, and what young people need? So we bridge this information gap as well. And indeed, because Youngo has a strong network with multiple regional and also international organizations, we also connect young people in those regions to connect with those organizations as well, who can support them in their own way. So yeah, I think these are some of the ways that you can be a part of COE and also be a part of Youngo as a whole. Did I answer your query, Parag?
No, Izzy, thank you. That was a great answer. And most importantly, you finished right on time. So that's great. So we are at the end of our discussion. Can we take a couple of questions if we have some time?
What we can do is, if we have question, we can type that in chat and we can answer it by chat as well. So what
that
I
would
would
be
do is
great.
they can type in chat and we can have the answer right now. Since we are out of time, so I would love like to hand it over to Sissy. Sissy, you can come in.
Thank you so much, Taimur, for moderating our session, and to our speakers and panelists for an insightful and fruitful discussion on the importance of bringing and providing opportunities to amplify youth voices. As Taimur mentioned, if anyone has any questions to the panelists, please feel free to use the chat function to ask your questions. We can answer them in the chat as well. Let us give our panelists and speakers another warm round of virtual applause.